Hi again, everybody. So you guys were desirous of more of the sci-fi story, as yet untitled. Um, if you have a good title for it, um, feel free to send it to me, because I'm actually really bad at titling things. So yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna read more of that. This is gonna be a long episode. I actually recorded this a couple days ago, and didn't like how it came out, but it is going to be a really long episode, like probably 20 to 25 minutes. So with that in mind, I'll stop doing an introduction and actually get around to the reading. So when last we left our heroes, Daniel had just agreed to join the cause, to take down or to uncover the possible government conspiracy. So, on Daniel's doorstep, they stopped, bathed in the blue light of the street lamp overhead. He held both of her hands in his, as though they had been dancing. "Will you be all right at home?" she asked. "Of course I will," he replied, and squeezed her hands. "Because, she hesitated, glancing to the side. "I could stay the night." Her gaze returned to him. "If you wanted." I... Daniel swallowed. "Do you want to stay? At my place, I mean. It's awfully small, and the butler is really annoying." She grinned, then ducked her head to hide the expression behind an oil slick of gold-limbed hair. "This is why I end up making all the decisions, Daniel. Because when I give you the opportunity, you don't take it." She met his eyes again and took a step closer to him. "Here's your opportunity. Take it." He held very still, staring into her street lamp blue eyes, the warmth of her body easing back the night's chill, her hands smooth and firm in his own. He leaned forward and brushed his lips to hers. "Take care, Minami," he said, and dropped her hands, turning away. "Good night, Daniel," she replied, a hint of disappointment in her voice. He didn't turn around. One look at her and he'd change his mind. Then, as he opened the door and stepped in, she said softly, "I love you. I don't tell you enough, I know. But I love you." He stopped, every fiber of him demanding that he turn around, insisting he throw wide the door and sweep her up into his arms. "I love you too," he replied. Close the door, he thought. Close it and lock it and go to sleep. He turned and rested his head against the doorframe, looking at her. She stood alone under the street lamp, her hands in fists by her sides, goosebumps on her eggshell skin, some secret emotion trying to fight its way out through her clenched jaw. "I just need some Daniel time." The brilliant gaze lowered. The fight went out of her. "Of course," she said. "Call me tomorrow, all right?" Daniel nodded. "All right. Good night, Minami." "Good night." He closed the door and let it lock, then leaned his head against it. A green-blue glow filled the room, and the butler asked, "Will you be wanting dinner, sir?" "No," Daniel replied, unmoving. Why did I send her away? "Very well, sir. Would you like me to—" "Turn off," he sighed, exasperated. The green light flickered and died. At a soft whirring behind him, he finally turned from the door. The robotic arm paused in the midst of folding his laundry, almost guiltily. It set down a folded shirt and drifted away into the kitchen, retreating into its nook like an eel into a dark crevice, slowly, ponderously. That night, Daniel slept in the shower. End of chapter. Next chapter! It wasn't until Tuesday that a further break in routine intruded upon Daniel's life. He was sitting at his desk, waiting for his code to compile, when an email came in from the Department of Psychiatry, subject line, "Your appointment." Brows furrowing, he opened the email. "Good morning, Mr. Rodriguez. This email reminder is being sent to you to remind you of your mandatory quarterly appointment with the Department of Psychiatry. You are scheduled for Thursday, March 24th at 3 p.m. If this time is inconvenient for you, please reply to this email with the word reschedule in the subject line and include at least 3 alternate appointment times. We highly encourage you, however, to attend the appointment we have scheduled for you. If for any reason you cannot reschedule or attend your appointment, please give 24 hours notice by calling our office at 1-614-223-1919. Thank you for your time. Brenda Evans, National Department of Psychiatry." Daniel stared at the email for a long time, his jaw clenched. He turned in his chair, rolling backward across the aisle between cubicles into the desk space of a mid-30s Pakistani woman. He waved a hand in her peripheral vision, and she tugged her earbud out from under her hijab, turning to look at him. "What is it this time, Daniel?" she asked. "Hey, Azra, sorry to bother you again, but I have a question." "Can't you ask Brian?" she lamented. "I'm kind of in the middle of something." "I know, sorry, ordinarily I would, but he hasn't worked here long enough to really know." She sighed. "All right, what is it?" "Do we have mandatory quarterly psychiatry evaluations?" he asked. Her fine eyebrows met over her nose. "No, or at least we haven't in the 5 years I've been working here. Maybe it's a new thing, though. Where did this come from?" "I got an email saying they'd scheduled me for my, quote, mandatory quarterly appointment with the Department of Psychiatry, unquote." Let me check. Maybe I have one too." She turned and flipped tabs to her email. There was no message concerning a psychiatry appointment. Azra shook her head. "Sorry, Daniel. Looks like I don't have one yet. Maybe they just haven't sent mine out? There are a lot of us." "Yeah," Daniel said, severely discomfited. "That's probably it. Thanks, Azra. Sorry to bother you." "Daniel," she said quietly, leaning towards him, her honey-colored eyes intense. "Is there any reason psychiatry would think you need an appointment?" He sighed. "I work for Suzanne King," he replied. "That's reason enough, isn't it?" Azra cracked a smile. "Amen to that, kid." Daniel smiled wanly and rolled back to his own desk. He stared at the email for a few more moments, then pulled out his phone and thumbed a message to Minami. "You were right." He hit send and leaned back in his chair, hoping she would understand. It wasn't long before her reply came in. "I told you so. Let's do lunch." Daniel checked his watch, then replied, "It's 3 p.m. To which Minami countered, "Excuses." "I'll be done in 2 hours," Daniel typed. "I'll meet you in the quad then." "Fine, dinner then. Don't be late." Just then, Daniel's code finished compiling, and he was forced to get back to work. At 5:15, he met Minami in the Fountain Quad. "Hey," he said. "Hi," she replied. "You didn't call me yesterday like you said you would." "I know," he said. "I'm sorry. I meant to, I just couldn't think of anything to say." She shrugged. "It's fine. I guess I can let it go this time. Come on, I'm starving." They had a quiet, reserved dinner at a small Chinese restaurant at the edge of downtown. At first, Minami attempted to engage him in conversation, but gave up when he continued to give stunted, one-word answers. He was too preoccupied with his thoughts to pay much attention to her, too angry with the department's lies to think about much anything else. As they walked back towards Daniel's apartment, hand in hand, he finally began to talk. "I've been scheduled for a psychiatric evaluation on Thursday," he said. They're pretending it's mandatory for all employees, but Azra Williams, she's worked there for like 10 years now. She's never heard of anything like that. He sighed. So, you were right. I'm sorry, Daniel, Minami said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. What, no, I told you so? Ordinarily I would, she replied, but you seem pretty upset about it. That's an understatement, he said. What do I do? She squeezed his hand. You go to the appointment and you tell them what they want to know. Startled, he leaned away and regarded her. Are you sure that's a good idea? He said. The truth is always a good idea, she said. Her eyes flickered to the street lamps overhead. Some of them were equipped with cameras, and there was no telling how good the audio quality on them was. Of course, Daniel stammered. So, are you doing anything Thursday night? I'm probably going to need to unwind after the appointment. Doctors freak me out. I know they do, Minami replied. The tension had gone from her face, but her hand was still gripping his uncomfortably tight. I think I have just the thing to take your mind off it. We'll need to go shopping again, though. It's bad form to wear the same outfit to the same place twice. Daniel sighed. I'll check to see if I got that raise when I got home, he said. Minami kissed him on the cheek and whispered, I hope you learn how to lie in the next 48 hours, love. Returning the kiss, he replied, Your confidence in me is inspiring. She just smiled. Wednesday was interminably long while it was happening, but when Thursday morning dawned, Daniel was forced to wonder how 24 hours could be so impossibly short. Work was dreadful, and he mainly ended up browsing videos of kittens falling asleep because he couldn't focus on his code. All too soon, 2:30 rolled around, and he decided he should probably leave then unless he wanted to take the rails to the Department of Psychiatry, and besides, all this waiting was driving him insane. The Department of Psychiatry was located a little less than a mile from the National Department of Computing building. Daniel strolled down the wide sidewalks, chewing his lip and thinking hard. The building itself, when he came to it, was large and off-white, which he supposed was intended to be friendly or perhaps professional, but came off as making it look like a prison. Or at least what he supposed Earth-based prisons looked like, based on television shows, as he'd never seen one in real life. Inside, everything was glass and tasteful flower arrangements and unobjectionable paintings hanging on the cream-colored walls. The front desk was a large, semicircular affair, much like one you would find in a bank. Daniel walked up to the woman at the far right station and cleared his throat, hands shoved deep in his pockets. The woman, a pretty brunette in her late 20s, looked up, pleasantly surprised. "Oh," she cried. "I'm sorry, I didn't see you come in. What can I help you with today, sir?" Daniel was caught off balance, not having expected this chipper greeting. "I have an appointment." "Okay, can I have your ID chip, please?" Silently, Daniel pulled his keyring from his pocket and handed it to the woman. She scanned the chip with the laser reader next to her computer and handed Daniel's keys back. "All right, Mr. Rodriguez, you're going to be seeing Dr. Weingarten. She's on the second floor, office 2212. It'll be the first door on your left." Thanks, said Daniel, still teetering from the unexpectedly good service. He wandered toward the elevators opposite the atrium's entryway, looking around for any sign of foul play. He saw none, merely overstuffed chairs and ordinary people sitting on them, thumbing away at their phones. The elevator lifted him to the second floor like a gentle breeze lifting a bubble. There was a white noise generator in the hallway playing quiet rainforest sounds. If this place gets any more damn tranquil, I'm gonna pass out, Daniel grumbled to himself. He knocked on the first door to the left, which had the number 2212 in aluminum numbers next to it, along with a plaque that had a business card for Karen Weingarten, M.D., inserted into it. "Come in," a voice called from within. Hesitantly, Daniel turned the aluminum doorknob and pushed open the door. Dr. Karen Weingarten was a dark-skinned woman in her late 30s, several months pregnant. Her hair was arranged into simple braids that ran along her head, and her attire was reserved. In her lap, she held a palm-sized touchscreen tablet, presumably for taking notes, since there was a slim black stylus in her hand. Her office was small and cozy, bookshelves filled with psychological journals and textbooks, topped off with plants and souvenirs. Her desk was pushed against the back wall, facing a window. She sat in an armchair facing the room at large, across from which was an upholstered sofa with several soft pillows stacked in the corners. The room was softly lit, but not dim. Dr. Weingarten smiled at Daniel and indicated the sofa. "Please, sit down. I would shake your hand, but I'm afraid my immune system is rather fragile at the moment." "Oh, of course," Daniel said, settling on the very edge of the couch. It was like sitting on the event horizon of a black hole. He could feel the cushions actively trying to pull him in. "My name is Dr. Weingarten. Yours?" "Oh, Daniel Rodriguez." "Is it all right if I call you Daniel?" "Sure, that's fine." "All right, Daniel. First of all, I want you to know that everything you say here is absolutely confidential, except in the case that I believe there is a serious danger of you harming yourself or others. In that case, I'm afraid I would have to refer you to a hospital or mental institution, where they would be better able to take care of your needs. For the most part, however, I don't expect anything serious, as this is simply a checkup. Do you understand?" Daniel nodded. "Okay. I'm going to ask a few routine questions about you, and then you'll be free to go. Sound all right?" At a loss, Daniel nodded again. Covertly, he was scanning the room for hidden cameras. Probably fruitlessly, because security cameras these days could be made smaller than a button, but still produce high-quality video and sound. "Are you nervous, Daniel?" Dr. Weingarten asked, her voice ever so slightly cutting. Daniel's attention snapped back to her face, noticing her slightly narrowed eyes and the tilt of her head. He decided he should not start this interview by lying to a trained psychiatrist. He laughed nervously. "Yeah, I am," he said. "I've never been to a psychiatrist before, actually." "Ah, I see. Hopefully we can move past that." She shifted in her seat and crossed her legs at the ankles. "So, Daniel, where do you live?" "Government housing on Cherry Street. It's a one-bath, one-bedroom. Standard." "And do you like it there?" Daniel shrugged. "It's not bad. It's cheap, maybe a little small, but it's just me living there, so I don't really need a lot of space." "Do you get along well with your neighbors?" "Don't really know them," he answered. "I see them from time to time, but mostly I work all day and then spend the evenings at home, so I don't really get to talk to them much." "Okay. And where do you work?" "The National Department for Computing," Daniel answered, wondering why she was asking all these questions she obviously already knew the answers to. Perhaps she was checking his truthfulness. "I'm a coder. First year working there, but so far it's not bad." "So you enjoy your job?" Daniel hesitated. "For the most part," he hedged. "I don't really like my boss." "Oh?" said Dr. Weingarten. "Why is that?" "She's—" He chuckled to himself, looking at the far corner of the room. "Well, for lack of a better word, bossy. I really don't think she likes me. At all. She's snappish and short-tempered, and she keeps sending me to the main bank, which frankly scares the hell out of me, but if I complain about it to her, I think I'll lose my job." "Boy, Daniel, keep this up and she'll know about your conspiracy club in no time," he thought sardonically. "That is rough," Dr. Weingarten agreed, shaking her head sympathetically. "Do you often have trouble asserting yourself to others?" "I guess," Daniel said. "I've never really thought about it. Now that you mention it, though, I guess I do." Well, that's definitely something we can work on. If you'd like, I can send you some materials on assertiveness." Yeah, that'd be cool, thanks," Daniel said. "All right, I'll be sure to do that." She scribbled a quick note on her tablet. "Do you use any drugs, Daniel?" I... Have they shown her the video from the club? Does she know? Dr. Weingarten smiled a little. "It's okay, Daniel. Completely confidential. I promise." "I don't make a habit of it," Daniel hazarded, figuring it was ambiguous enough to not seem like a lie. "It's not an issue." She nodded slowly, making another little note. "Okay, well, you know yourself best. Overall, how would you say you feel, generally? Good, bad, happy, anxious?" "Generally pretty okay," Daniel answered. "I mean, ups and downs, sure, but on the whole, pretty okay." As the interview went on, he found himself relaxing. He sank back a little further into the couch, made eye contact with Dr. Weingarten more than once per minute, and kept his gaze out of the corners. She asked about his relationships with coworkers, how he and Minami got along, what sorts of things he did with his spare time. Eventually, she dropped a bombshell on him. "How are things with your parents?" It was like someone had delivered an electric shock to Daniel's spine. He froze, his jaw clenched. "Don't mention it, don't even think about it," he commanded himself internally. "My dad passed away a few years ago," he answered, surprised by the calmness of his own voice. "My mom and I don't really talk anymore." "I'm sorry to hear that," Dr. Weingarten said. "Do you feel you would like to have more contact with your mother?" Daniel shook his head. "We don't really have anything to talk about anymore." Apart from how much she hates me, he thought. Well, that's all the questions I have. Do you have any questions for me?" Another shake of the head. "All right, then. If you think of any, don't hesitate to call or email. I'd also like to schedule a follow-up appointment with you in, say, a month? Does this appointment slot work for you?" "I work 9 to 5, Daniel told her hastily. "So, not really, no." "What about a Saturday morning? April 23rd, 9 a.m.? I can't get out of this, can I?" he thought dismally. "Sure, I can do that." "Great. I'll have my office send you a reminder, and also those assertiveness materials I mentioned. Thank you again for coming in, Daniel. We do appreciate you taking the time to come see us, and I hope we can be of help to you." "Thanks," said Daniel. He politely showed himself out, then walked back to the National Department of Computing in a towering rage. Brian was at his desk when Daniel arrived back, and turned around with a huge grin. "Daniel! There you are! Where did you go?" "Not now, Brian," Daniel snapped, waving away the greeting like he would a bothersome fly. He stalked back to his desk and threw himself into his chair, sorely tempted to rip his computer to shreds with his bare hands. The feeling intensified when he saw the email from Dr. Weingarten, something about assertiveness materials. He deleted the email and, in a fit of pique, emptied his trash folder too. Since he couldn't actually smash anything physical into pieces, he contented himself instead with tearing down some buggy code and building it back up until it functioned properly. By the time he had it working, it was 5 o'clock, and he closed down his workstation and headed for the elevator, his anger still smoldering inside him. "Hey, Daniel?" Brian said, coming to stand next to him as he waited for the elevator. You okay?" Daniel sighed and shook his head, running a hand through his hair. "I had a psych appointment today," he said. "What for?" Shrugging, he replied, "They said it was a mandatory checkup. Quarterly." Brian's eyebrows shot up into his purple hair. "We have those?" "Not according to Azra." There was a pause. The elevator arrived and the two men stepped into it. After the doors had closed, Daniel said, "I guess I'm just pissed because, 1, they lied to me about why they scheduled it, and 2, the shrink wants a follow-up appointment in a month. I feel like they don't trust me to live my own life." "That sucks, dude," Brian said. "Hey, listen. Me and Jeremiah and the gang are going out for drinks on Saturday. Do you want to come? I'll check with Minami, Daniel replied. Her Highness doesn't need to put her stamp of approval on everything you do, Brian objected. And you wonder why you don't have a date, Daniel said, shaking his head. He cracked a smile for the first time that day. No, dude, I don't have a date because I'm not looking for one. Mostly, I wonder why you're still dating Minami, Brian answered. Daniel rolled his eyes. Brian... I mean, dude, she pushes you around like a shopping cart. I don't get it. I mean, like, is it a sex thing and I'm just not getting it? Hey, fuck off, Brian, Daniel snapped, bristling. Whoa, sorry, dude, Brian said, holding up his hands, palms out. The elevator began to decelerate, and he quickly sank into heavy stance. Daniel stared at the doors, fuming, his knees and hips aching with the added force. The elevator stopped and the doors opened. Daniel stepped out swiftly, leaving Brian to follow. Seriously, dude, I didn't mean to, offend you or anything. I seriously just don't get it. Forget it, Brian, Daniel sighed, rubbing his eyebrow where a headache was springing up. I just want to go home. Sure, man. And hey, listen, just give me a call if you want to go out with the gang on Saturday. No pressure, just, everybody needs a little unwinding now and then, right? Daniel looked at Brian, taking in the worried creases in his brow, the twitching of his lips as he chewed on the insides of his cheeks. Some people weigh more than others, dude. I'll let you know. Alrighty. So, yeah. That was fun. I hope you guys are still enjoying this. I'm gonna be reading a lot more of this story because, it's good and I like it. And apparently you guys really like it too. So I guess I will see you in the next video. Bye.